Why was Genghis Khan's tomb never found? Why does it remain a mystery? So this is one of the biggest mysteries of all time, isn't it? Why has his tomb never been found? Where is Genghis Khan's tomb? And people from the West have been seeking his tomb since the time of Kublai Khan, his grandson. So Marco Polo, the Italian merchant and traveler, went to China during Marco Polo's time. He spent a few years in Marco Polo's court, and he heard of this story that Genghis Khan's tomb was. He heard a very fantastic story about his funeral. It said that everybody who saw the funeral procession was killed, and an enormous hole was dug. His body was buried there, and the ground was stamped over by horses, and a river was diverted over the area so that nobody could ever find it. And then all the soldiers and people who participated in the funeral procession, they were also killed. So no one knows today, even at the time of Marco Polo, where this tomb was. And the belief in among Western historians and in the West is that Khan's tomb must have an enormous amount of treasure. So whoever discovers this tomb will become the richest person in the world. And that's why there has been this mad rush for centuries to discover the location of Genghis Khan's tomb. Even now, people are trying to go to Mongolia and discover this tomb. There have been a couple of National Geographic documentaries as well about the location of this tomb. It has never been found. And I'm going to tell you something, his tomb is never going to be found. It remains a mystery because it was decided to keep it a mystery. So Genghis Khan was not a stupid person. He knew what happens to the tombs of conquerors. Those tombs are eventually discovered and desecrated. Take the Mughal Emperor Akbar, the Turkic Emperor Akbar. After he died, a century or so after he died, Delhi was conquered by the Sikhs. His tomb was ransacked and his bones were fed to the dogs of Delhi. That's what happened to Akbar. If you look at the tomb of Timur, it was opened by Soviet archaeologists. His body, his skeleton was taken out. It was disarticulated. It was subjected to all kinds of medical and other tests. His skull was used as a model for reconstructing his face. So it is essentially a desecration of his tomb. And this has happened to emperors in Egypt and all kinds of other people. So Genghis Khan knew what happens when the tomb of a conqueror is discovered, especially when it contains treasure. There are tomb robbers everywhere. Now, the Mongols had a practice called sky burial. It was a practice that was also present and prevalent in Tibet. So, when somebody dies, their body is exposed on a hilltop to the elements. It is devoured by vultures and crows and other birds, and it goes back to the nature, and its spirit is carried away to wherever it is supposed to go. It's called a sky burial. It is a legitimate funerary practice in Mongolia. And Genghis Khan died in China. He died during the reconquest of the Shishya dynasty in northern China. Now, his ancestral homeland is the Khenti Khan Mountains in northern Mongolia, which is approximately 1,500 kilometers away. Now, to transport his body all the way back to Mongolia would take several months, and his body would decompose and rot in the meanwhile. And I don't think the Mongols would want to subject their body, the body of their great Khan, to such humiliation. So, what I believe is that after Genghis Khan died, his body was subjected to a sky funeral, a sky burial, and that is what happened. I don't think his tomb is present anywhere in Mongolia. I don't think he was entombed anywhere. I think his body was given up as a sky funeral, which is a very dignified thing. And because it happened so far away, because his death happened so far away from the place where he was born, I think that is the most logical explanation of how his funeral took place. And like I have explained before, he was not interested in wealth. He was never motivated by a desire to get wealthy, and therefore, this belief that his tomb would contain unimaginable amounts of wealth, it is a ridiculous assumption. So, my belief, my strong conviction is that His funeral was a sky funeral, and his tomb doesn't even exist. And that's why his tomb has never been found, and that's why it will remain a mystery to those who believe that he was buried somewhere.